the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
I just want to make a point, and that is be aware that there's a difference between divine revelation and what's called private revelation. Divine revelation is bona fide, absolute, inspired revelation from God through the Holy Bible, through apostolic tradition. And it is required. It's mandatory. You can't say, well, I like all the oral tradition, but I don't like the Bible, so I'm not going to listen to what the Bible says. You can't say that as a Catholic. We are obligated to pay attention to and to heed and to believe in and obey divine revelation. That's God's message to you in what he wants you to know and believe and do. But that's a different category from what's called private revelation. Now, private revelation would indeed be binding on the person or persons to whom it is given. So if the Lord were to give to, let's say, 3 shepherd children in the middle of nowhere in Portugal in 1917 and say the Blessed Virgin Mary appears to them and gives them messages, and over the course of 6 months, let's just say, successive messages and information and prophecies culminating in a mind-bending miracle where all the people who had assembled, who were thinking, well, this may indeed be the apparitions of Our Lady, and they were there and they were curious. Some were doubtful, some were skeptics, some were scoffers, some were true blue believers. You had a mix. And they were there, let's just say on October the 17th, 1917, just to, pull something out of the air. And then there's this huge miracle that 70-some thousand people see, including atheists and Freemasons and communists. And it's reported in the newspapers as far away as Lisbon. I mean, that's an example of private revelation. And it would be incumbent solely upon those 3 shepherd children to accept this and believe this if the Mother of God is appearing to them. And indeed she did, because the church not only gave a nihil obstat to Fatima eventually, it was controversial at first, but within a matter of a short period of time, the church said, yes, this is authentic, this is from heaven, and made it a feast day, I should say, in the church's calendar, and encouraged devotion to Our Lady of Fatima, encouraged pilgrimages and things like that. I mean, that's like at the far end of the scale when it comes to church approval. But even still, Fatima is still a private revelation. I think personally, one would be unwise to ignore the private revelations that were given at Fatima in 1917. I think word to the wise that you do well to pay attention to this. Doesn't mean you have to go there. Cyrus, have you ever made a pilgrimage to Fatima?
I have not, no.
How come? How come you haven't gone to Fatima yet?
I'm sorry.
I'm role-playing here. But the point is, you don't have to go to Fatima to make a pilgrimage. I think you would be, and I don't mean you personally, Cyrus, just you rhetorically would be unwise to ignore this church-approved apparition. Keep in mind, Medjugorje is not, quote-unquote, church-approved. There's a cautious nihil obstat. Again, that's the Latin phrase that means that nothing stands in the way at this point of people making pilgrimages and things like that. And the way this trajectory looks, I would guess that eventually it could end up in a formal church approval, but that hasn't happened yet. So we have to take things as they come. But if you or your next door neighbor or the guy down the street never made a pilgrimage to Fatima, that's okay. You're not obligated to do that. I mean, the ultimate pinnacle of divine revelation, which is obligatory, is Jesus Christ himself. And he lived and ministered and died on the cross and rose from the dead in Jerusalem. And that's divine revelation that we're required to believe. And nobody should be asked, well, how come you haven't gone to Jerusalem? Does that mean you don't believe? No, of course not. You don't have to go there in order to have belief in that. It's great if you can go, make a pilgrimage if you can. But I just want to draw that important distinction because, in my experience at least, there are some who turn their pet private revelation, and it could be Fatima, could be, take your pick. And in the case of Medjugorje, we're speaking about an alleged apparition that the church has not yet formally, fully approved of. It seems that things are trending in that direction, but it hasn't gotten to that point yet. But there are people, I've met them. I've spent long hours in discussion with some of these people over the years for whom that is almost like the more important thing to them than divine revelation itself. Their favorite devotion, their favorite seer, their favorite private apparition, that kind of thing. And that would be a very unhealthy imbalance. And the church says this, and the church reminds us that people are not obliged. So I don't want you to feel guilty if somebody says to you, how come you haven't made a pilgrimage there, huh? How come? Why? It doesn't mean anything one way or the other. And if you go and you receive benefit and graces, great. That's perfect. Would that all people received those things if they have the wherewithal to make a pilgrimage to one of the approved apparition sites or one that is under investigation right now, consideration. Maybe investigation has connotations that I don't intend. I don't mean it in a negative sense. But if things are trending in a positive direction at Medjugorje, the church is saying, you're free to go. You're free to make a pilgrimage. You're free to receive graces. Whatever God may have in store for you there, you're free to do that. And that's the key. Don't let anyone ever guilt you into thinking, well, you have to follow this, or you have to follow that seer, or you've got to, you know what I'm saying? Because that's not what the church teaches. I think I can leave it at that. You can join me by listening to The Patrick Madrid Show on the Relevant Radio app, live each weekday at 8 to 11 a.m. And thanks for listening.